Jolla, a small Finnish company formed by ex-Nokians, has offered a preview of its forthcoming smartphone platform called Sailfish. This is based on MeeGo and has some of the elements of the Harmattan UI from the likes of the N9. Still appallingly early days though, Jolla has so far only committed to bringing devices to one market by the end of summer 2013. Too little too late, or a brave new venture? Jury's out. Sony has launched a new budget version of their Android line in the Xperia E with much the same experience as on the higher-end phones like the T, but with a 3.5-inch half VGA display instead. Mind you, there is Android 4.1 out of the box, which the T still hasn't got. The E is reported to have a great speaker and comes in black, white and pink colour versions. There's talk of, quote, intelligent utility software that stops all data traffic a few minutes after the user stops interacting with the screen. Eh? Sounds dumb to me. I guess we're not the target market. Samsung's new SCHW 2013, only available in China so far, is interesting in that it's a flip phone with an internal and external Super AMOLED screens, both 3.7 inches. Yet, this is a full Android 4 device with quad-core 1.4 GHz processor and 2 GB of RAM. Wow. 16GB internal storage with microSD as well, and an 8-megapixel camera, and an 1850 mAh battery, and it's even dual SIM. Bring this to Europe, I say. This was supposed to be an in-depth, formal review of the new Nexus 4 made by LG, for which my expectations were sky high, but I'm so disappointed by it that I'm afraid this is going to turn into a bit of a rant. Apologies in advance. In fact, I'm even going to make the outrageous recommendation for existing Galaxy Nexus owners that they save the modest purchase price and stay with its predecessor. Heaven knows the Galaxy Nexus isn't perfect, but there are so many ways and this successor actually isn't. I guess I should run through the improvements that have been made very quickly. The screen's RGB now and 8% larger thanks to a 0.1-inch increase in the diagonal and an extra 48 pixels of width. The processor's quad-core now, the battery's 2100 mAh as standard, there's faster pentaband 3.5G, the camera's got an HDR mode built in, and yes, there's key wireless charging if you want to buy the add-on charging plate. It's not in the box. Sound good so far? Well, incremental improvements and all nice to have, and yes, incredible value for money at the price Google's selling it for all across the world. No argument, zero argument for me there. But then the ranting starts. Now you're expecting me to rant about the unexpandable 16GB storage, but then that's the same as the Galaxy Nexus, so I can't, so I'll move on. Do stay away from the 8GB model. This is the one sent over for review. With my apps installed and one program of each podcast downloaded, 10 CDs and a couple of music videos, I'm down to 1GB free. 1GB. Just say no. 16 gig it is. You're also expecting me to rant about the sealed battery here in comparison to the Galaxy Nexus is trivial to pop in and pop out cell, but I won't. Although it annoys me, at least LG had the decency to 1. Make it 2100 mAh, 2. Use a high-performance lithium polymer battery, and 3. Rated at 800 charge cycles. The industry norm is closer to 500. And if all else fails, a few years down the line, you can, yes, undo the 2 screws and pry the back off and then pry out the glued-in battery as a last resort. Which brings me to another possible rant. Do you remember the HTC Sensation, also running Android, which I blasted for having its RF antennae in the back cover and relying on sprung contacts to the main body of the phone, and then wondering why the RF performance was erratic? Duh. The Nexus 4 is nowhere near as bad since the back isn't supposed to come off, but I did note from the iFixit teardown here that all the RF antennae are mounted on the glass back and connected to the main body of the Nexus 4 with sprung contacts. Now, I'm sorry, but that's just bad design. Now, this might be paranoia. I've zero evidence that any of these sprung contacts have ever failed for anybody, but you have to wonder which RF systems will become erratic after your Nexus 4's first fall. So, not so much a rant here, but a worry. But let the ranting proper start with the screen. Yes, it's slightly bigger than the Galaxy Nexus and crisper, but the LCD display is nowhere near as vibrant as the Super AMOLED one on the Galaxy Nexus. I did a blind test with several friends, showing them the same video clip and the same home screen, and every single one of them picked the older device as, quote, being easier to read and having much better colours. On the Nexus 4, the blacks, they aren't really black, and the colours don't leap out. Maybe I've been ruined by years of using AMOLED screens, but well, the Nexus 4 is just disappointing. Outside in sunlight, the contrast on the Nexus 4 was a little bit disappointing, nowhere near as good as on the Galaxy S3, for example, and the Nokia 808. What next? The speaker. Now, I listen to a lot of podcasts on my phone, and at least half of these are out loud while doing chores. The Galaxy Nexus has a famously weedy speaker, and I was assured that the Nexus 4 speaker was a big improvement. It's not. Let's try it. This is full volume. I'd say it's perhaps 30% louder. But I was looking for 300% louder, something to match my Nokia's, shut that up, Joe, or our family iPhone. The Nexus 4 speaker here was just as inaudible around the house, just as impossible to hear in the car, and again, just plain disappointing.
The camera is now 8 megapixels and not 5, but the images it generates aren't significantly better, I'd say. They're over-sharpened in typical modern smartphone fashion. Outdoors, results are unspectacular. Indoors, they're again very, well, average. Novelty HDR mode apart, the Nexus 4's camera doesn't really outpace that in the Galaxy Nexus. The D word comes to mind again, disappointing. I really was expecting a bit more here from LG.
It's cold, wet, dark and freezing outside, so I'm indoors shooting test footage on the Google Nexus 4 continuous autofocus 1080p and pretty good audio as well. Then there are a bunch of niggles, things which I probably wouldn't have mentioned had the rest of the Nexus 4 blown my socks off. But to get the microSIM out, you can't use a paperclip. Oh no, it has to be the specific microscopic tool supplied by LG. Do not lose this. There's no headset in the box, not a showstopper for us, and I guess understandable at the price, but unusual to say the least. There's an annoying buzzing in the earpiece if the display's on full. But I'm nitpicking now, but it shows what sort of mood the Nexus 4 has got me in, and the complete fiasco over lack of availability for week after week after week really didn't help at all. Look, don't get me wrong, as an Android smartphone that's blazingly fast, the Nexus 4 is sumptuous value. If your idea of a smartphone is all web browsing and Instagram and gaming, this will suit you down to the ground and without draining your wallet. But I want more than that. I want quality components, high functionality, maximum flexibility, maximum robustness. I did mention the Nexus 4's back was all glass, and Google's new darling fails to impress on every front, however cheap it is. The fact that you can get the whole of Android 4.2.1 on the existing Galaxy Nexus as an over-the-air update means that the chances are that many of you watching this will already have seen and played with this latest version of Android. And if you own a Galaxy Nexus, there's very little point in getting the 4. Despite a few niggles though, I am more and more impressed by Android as an operating system, which is why I want to cover it and the software side of the 4 in its own feature very soon. But the Nexus 4 isn't the all-consuming holy grail phone that some of the American tech media are making out. If you've played away and used another manufacturer's phone and skin and now fancy stock Android, then yes, this is a competent 2013 choice, but no more than that. It's somewhat telling that if you were to offer me the choice of a Galaxy Nexus now a year old, a Galaxy S3 now 8 months old, or a shiny new Nexus 4, I'd probably take the S3 and stick a new launcher on the front end. The S3's got a better camera than the Nexus 4, better screen, better speaker, and you can mess around to your heart's content with batteries and expansion cards. It really is a no-brainer in my view. This is the slightly disappointing Google Nexus 4. It's actually quite easy to spot that whatever Nokia might claim, the Asha 311 is actually a feature phone trying to be smart. It doesn't get all the way. The clues are there from the start. Only 128 megabytes of RAM. I don't care how efficient the Series 40 OS is, you can't do much in terms of rendering, well, anything in that sort of memory. Only 61 megabytes free on the system disk out of the box. Appalling video codec support. None of my test MP4s played properly. Appallingly slow USB transfers too. The 3-inch screen is capacitive, always good for a budget phone, but the 240 by 400 pixel resolution is a huge letdown in this day and age. This isn't much more than my Nokia N93 had in 2006. The clues go on. There's no GPS here, no voice guidance. The camera would be appalling for something again from 2006. The multitasking is only for a few select system processes. Everything else, including the web browser and the App Store, have to be restarted and then explicitly closed every single time. There's word completion, but not correction, so I still pack out non-words like ANS, TGE, on the titchy QWERTY keyboard in email or messaging, two of the very few apps that actually do support landscape mode here. Dialogues like this pop up all the time asking whether you really do want to close the current app. Well, no, I really do want to keep it running, but you're not going to let me, are you, you stupid thing? So why the heck are you asking? Yes, Nokia claim this is a smartphone. Well, okay, it can run Angry Birds, actually quite well, and music, core telephony, social functions, all multitask, and you can browse and add extra applications. So it's a kind of smart, just not very desirable to most of you watching this. Nokia and EA make a big deal out of the latter providing 40 free games for the Asha series, but wait, they're pretty old and horrible ports from Java games from 2008, just say no. Which is not to say that there aren't some highlights here. Series 40's facelift has nods to Android, to Symbian, to MeeGo and iOS, even if it doesn't get close to any of these. The web browser here is proxy-based, meaning that it'll save the user quite a lot of data on their tariff. Battery life is great, mainly because most people won't do much with the Asha 311. The screen here is Gorilla Glass and build quality is generally pretty good, albeit an utter fingerprint magnet. The speaker's decent too, let me demonstrate. So, well, it's fairly loud and piercing, but it certainly beats quite a few smartphones. There's dual charging here, 2mm and micro USB, and full mass storage modes if needed to any desktop, Ichihato Windows Phone 8. The front call and hang up buttons are perfect, though the less said about these stiff monstrosities on the phone's side, the better. All of which isn't enough to save the Asha 311 from ignominy at this price. Even for an unambitious user, I think they'll be disappointed at £110 for this. Even a little research will show them an older but better Symbian-based Nokia, or a budget Android phone that will match this or better, or one of the various Windows Phone 7 handsets. The Lumia 710 is usually about the same price as this and is 1 billion times more friendly and capable. At £50, I'd be generously qualifying who this handset is aimed at. At over £100, I'm going to save my breath. I can't honestly recommend it to anyone. Sorry.